Gwanghwamun Square glows in purple this past Saturday as K-pop sensation BTS takes the stage for the first time in roughly 4 years with its new album, Arirang. Hello, hope your work week is off to a good start. It's Monday, March 23rd, and you're watching Press Perspective. BTS is back with Arirang after an almost 4-year halt in group activities, and we touch upon its, quote, royal reunion with fans at a historic venue in downtown Seoul. For more on this, I have Marianna Baroli with Italian news magazine Panorama here in the studio. Marianna, it's great to have you here.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you.
I also have freelance journalist Raphael Rashid with us. Raphael, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Good to be back, thank you.
Marianna, we start with you. So you were at Gwanghwamun Square this past weekend to cover BTS's free comeback concert. Let's start with your take on the atmosphere there.
Well, the atmosphere was amazing, but with armies involved, it's always like that. So we couldn't expect more. It was a great purple wave and then a great red wave. It was I think it was what we expected from BTS comeback. Also the setting, it was like so magnificent. So I think it was a real royal coming back. Honestly, I was a little scared about the place because, you know, for security reason, everything was so closed and, you know, everything was, I don't know, I had this weird feeling walking through the security, but also it was so secure and so controlled that I think everyone enjoyed it in the end, and that's what was the most important part. And I think it was a very great comeback show.
Right, I understand the event. The atmosphere there was electric. Raphael, what were your takeaways from Saturday's mega event?
Yeah, I was also in the crowd somewhere in Gwanghwamun on Saturday night, and I think what struck me the most, at least, was, as Marianna talked about, the setting of the place. This is Gwanghwamun Square. It's not just a public space anywhere in Korea. This is central Seoul. This is where Koreans have gathered for candlelight vigils. You know, even when 2 presidents have been impeached, and a lot of the main protests took place in this area. So I think choosing that location was very kind of symbolic, especially with the walls of Gyeongbokgung Palace in the background. You had these kind of projections, it made it like a kind of canvas part of the stage. So I think it was a deliberate choice that felt, you know, that they're taking this place rooted deep in Korean history and using their BTS identity, the pairing of the most symbolic K-pop group in the world and the most symbolic kind of background. I think that was very deliberate. Also, I think the sheer scale and size of this and reaching global audiences. Of course, there were 22,000 ticketed, tickets essentially for free for audiences, and there were many thousands of people more in the surrounding streets. I met fans on the day in the streets from Japan, Guam, Bolivia, just really coming from all over the place with or without a ticket. One family had flown 15 hours from Mexico, family of 4, just to be there to absorb the atmosphere, even though they didn't actually have tickets. I think that was very moving. Of course, at the same time, this was broadcast live around the world to, I believe, over 190 countries. So this kind of simultaneous local and global kind of presence, I think, was very unique for this kind of cultural event, really, for the country. And of course, you know, BTS are back, and by the time that this concert took place, I believe they had already sold around 4 million copies of the new album. And when they opened with their title, well, when they opened with the song Body to Body, which includes a piece of Arirang kind of theme inside, I think a lot of people felt very moved. And I met one Korean who said that she was basically crying when she heard the sound of Arirang.
Right, for sure. I heard that as well. Marianna, BTS's fashion for this comeback concert also made quite a bit of headlines. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Absolutely. I think the choice of Sonjio was like amazing. To be honest, probably with the name Arirang, we were expecting something very traditional. And it actually was, but at the first impact, it wasn't, because it was very modern, very, I think, also we can say like very ground, but in a luxurious way, and also very effortlessly, because they can wear anything, of course. They can we can put everything on them and they always look good. So I think that was also a great choice. But the jewelry, the hairstyles, everything was so perfect. And I think the Sonjio choice, it was amazing because it was the right mix between the modern and the past. So I had to write it down, sorry, but it's too many. But for example, having Namjoon sing as the leader, so you can see what was going on, but also having, for example, Suga as the architect, so the structure of the clothes and everything, it was reflecting the way he writes the song, because it's basically the main producer. And so then there was Jimin, the poet, and everyone was telling that Jimin looks like an angel on the stage with the long hair and everything, but it's true, it was like the movement of the clothes and everything was insane. And then Jin was extremely luxurious and extremely professional, and is the older one in the group. So I think the clothes were a nice balance between past and modern. And then we had like Jungkook with the Vanguard. So it was like projecting the group into the future. So the 2.0, what they said on the stage, BTS 2.0 was just starting. And then I think we had J-Hope and V. They were amazing, because I think that was really the jump in the past of the story, because we have J-Hope at the Soryegun. So it was very rooted in the Korean tradition. And then we have V as the Doryong, which is like a noble figure, right? I'm telling it right, Sunny. And so it was combining elegance and everything. So the cinematic presence was incredible. And I think it was very well received. And also the jewelry, I saw that V was wearing jade, for example. And now the jade shop is like a new army mecca for everyone, because everyone wants those rings. And it's always like that with BTS. They can set the new trends. And I think that BTS 2.0 are telling us that something new is coming in K-pop as well.
Right. Staying with what Marianna just said, Raphael, in fact, BTS's comeback, it has triggered fresh talk about the economic benefits of the cultural industry. What have you been hearing, Raphael?
Sure. I mean, I think there will definitely be certain economic effects and the kind of final tally won't probably come out for another few days. But I do think the numbers, at least in the run-up to the concert, were quite striking. Bloomberg, in particular, calculated that Saturday's free concert event alone could could potentially generate around $177 million in economic impact for Seoul, based on spending, flights, hotel, food, merchandise, and streaming. To put this in context, if we look at, say, Taylor Swift's Eras tour, averaged somewhere between $50 and $70 million per US stop. So a single BTS show or concert is estimated to potentially outperform this considerably. And that's before the actual world tour has taken place. As we all know, BTS will be flying around the world. They have an 82-date Arirang tour across 5 continents. And it's projected, well, at least some projections say that it might generate somewhere around $2 billion in total revenue, which would directly rival Taylor Swift's Eras record, which was around $2.2 billion for her 150-odd shows. So I think there is definitely, the ticket sales that are important, but of course the economic ripple effects on the street level. As we've covered several times on this show, we saw how hotel prices in Seoul quadrupled in some places was the dates surrounding the concert, and many places were sold out across town. Searches on online platforms for hotels surged. I think it was 160% on some platforms within 48 hours of the tour announcement. A lot of food vendors or even shops in the area were reported to have ordered substantially more inventory for the day or for that weekend, some places 5 times, 10 times more than usual. So I think that this demonstrates that the cultural industry here isn't just kind of soft power in an abstract form. I mean, I'm thinking already of K-pop Demon Hunters and the effect that that's had on, you know, even museum merchandise that has skyrocketed over the past year. So I think, you know, when we're talking about this BTS concert and kind of subsequent world tour, this translates into very real, concrete economic activity, tourism, hospitality, retail, especially at a time, you know, for the concerts, at least in Korea, where domestic demand has been fairly fragile. So I think kind of the BTS return functions almost as a stimulus package, if you will.
Right, leading to tangible revenue for quite a number of businesses. Marianna, meanwhile, BTS returns with its 5th album, as I mentioned, called Arirang. What has been the critics' response to this new album?
I think everyone was expecting a very Korean album at first. So when the tracklist came out, everyone was, I think, pretty confused at first, seeing so many American producers, you know. And then the album actually came out, everyone listening to it, and they were like, wow, this is something else. This is something very new. So probably there were like the purists of the genre that they were like, oh, this is not K-pop. And then, but if you look at this, we are in 2026. K-pop cannot be the K-pop we knew like 10 years, 15 years ago. So now K-pop is global. It's something that everyone is talking about in all the world. So I think it's only natural for it to develop, you know? And so they were like something new. I think that their songs are actually great, and they actually mix Korean things. Like we have the bell, you know, which is very traditional, and then we have Arirang, and then we have some Korean rap. We have everything, but also we have EDM, which is a very new genre and something that people probably need to be accustomed with, you know, when talking about BTS. But the track list is great, and when you hear Swim, is like everywhere already, and it's stuck in your mind.
And Swim is a lead track.
Yeah, and also it's a very, very soft song, but it's also very, very, I think it's very relatable, and that's what BTS are. You can find yourself in all their songs, so that's their power. And I think they also answered one of the biggest questions people were talking about. Are BTS still the BTS we knew before the army and before getting enlisted? And the question, their answer is yes. They totally came back as 7, and we can see the chemistry is back. They're back on stage. They're stronger than ever. And I think they're only ready to show what's next. They told us during the live concert, it was like, BTS are back, but it's BTS 2.0. Let's see what's happening. And I think everyone is curious, but I think the critics' response is very great. I saw that everyone is like 5 stars or so, 4 or 5 stars. So also the fans, I think, are really loving it, and everyone has his favorite track, of course, but yeah, I think it's a great album.
Right. Well, as Raphael mentioned earlier, the album itself sold well over 4 million copies within 3 days of its release last Friday. So that's also a remarkable achievement, of course. Raphael, back to the concert this past weekend, priority was placed on public safety. What's your take on the efforts to that end on that particular Saturday evening?
Yeah, I think anyone who was in Seoul that day would have witnessed how strong the security was surrounding the Gwanghwamun Square and everything to do with the concert. Seoul Police Agency had deployed 6,500 officers on the day, including roughly 70 riot police. I did see some SWAT teams. I saw some sniffer dogs. And then Seoul City government deployed a further 3,400 personnel to help. I believe other government agencies also deployed their own personnel. So there were, a substantial amount of non-attendees in the crowd as well. On top of that, there were around 100 fire trucks on standby, around 800 firefighters also positioned around the concert site. The venue itself was managed as if it was a kind of effectively like a stadium, and so every entry point had metal detection to walk through, and they were very I think it was very rigorous. I had a few jellies. We weren't allowed any food. I had a few jellies in my bag, even those were like confiscated away. So they were very rigorous. You had vehicle barriers with kind of metal iron spikes, just to prevent kind of vehicle ramming. Subways bypassed the nearby stations. So it was quite substantial. I think the reasoning behind that I think there are two main reasons. The first and probably most obviously is that South Korea still carries the deep trauma of the 2022 Itaewon crowd crush, which killed 159 people. And I think that was at the back of many people's minds. The president's chief of staff said a few weeks ago that when you have an event drawing hundreds of thousands of people, a single accident could cause significant damage to the country's prestige. And actually President Lee Jae-myung also early last week during a cabinet meeting, he did mention that the issue is safety and called for heightened vigilance around with all emergency services. I think the second dimension, of course, was the genuine security threat assessment by police who noted the possibility of a kind of terrorist attack. That they could not rule this out, especially given the kind of international circumstances at the moment, especially including in the Middle East. And lest we forget that the US embassy was literally in the middle of it all, 160 meters away from the main stage. But luckily and thankfully, in the end, the concert passed without any major incident. And Seoul police described the crowd management as having gone very smoothly.
Right. Some of the measures taken by the authorities, Raphael, were criticized for having caused inconvenience to the general public. What were your observations on the ground? Yeah,
it's difficult to say. I think there was a bit of a balance to be happening. Of course, these kind of security issues that I just outlined were at the back of, I think, authorities' minds, and unfortunately, that means that there will be some inconveniences. Of course, traffic was diverted, transport, subway stations essentially closed around there, bus routes diverted, roads severely restricted from the night before or even the morning off. One woman who had booked her wedding reception at a venue basically in the middle of it all told local media that she felt utterly helpless, having received no advance warning, no assistance from the organizers or from local authorities. So we had this wedding, and then eventually the police had to actually run dedicated shuttle service to bring the guests, and even when the guests arrived, they had to go through these metal detectors. So I think, there was, of course, that element. I think the second strand of criticism was financial. As I mentioned, thousands of public officials were deployed on the day. And of course, this comes at a huge expense to the taxpayer. Hybe, of course, the organizers of this show reportedly just paid for the venue fees covering Gwanghwamun Square, the palace, and kind of nearby areas. But as I understand, under current law, there is no mechanism to foot the bill, basically to bill a private event organizer for police costs, for example. So there has been a lot of online reaction saying that basically these public funds should be paid for by the organizers. There was another issue, civil liberties. Some NGOs, basically, they were prevented from carrying out, as I mentioned, this is a very public space where there are lots of protests every week, and so then they're saying, well, we're not allowed to protest. That's unconstitutional. So there were several layers. HYBE did issue a formal apology actually yesterday, the following day, acknowledging the disruptions were unavoidable, but also expressing genuine regret. And the Seoul police chief's response was essentially today that safety responses were essential, and even if it was seen as excessive, it was necessary. So again, coming back to this balance, I think given the circumstances and the kind of history that Korea has gone through in the past few years, I think it's important to keep that in mind. And I suppose one final thing I would say is that inconveniences are part of daily life, and we've had many events in the square, whether it's protests or not, where massive resources have been mobilized and traffic has been diverted. So this is by no means the first time that this happens.
Right, and quite a number of pundits do point out that it's always better to be safe than sorry.
Exactly.
Right, Marianna, let's go back to BTS. From the stage here in Seoul, they are in New York City on this Monday for yet another comeback concert. Do tell us a bit about the group's agenda this year.
Well, it's an insane agenda, actually, and I don't envy them, to be honest, because I think they need a lot of stamina to keep going on for the whole year. But they're BTS, so they can make it. So now they're in New York, and I saw from their social media they're sharing that they're happy to be back. Of course, they're back in the US and something. It's in New York City, so it's very huge for them. And so another comeback concert, and then we have the whole world tour that is starting, I think, in 10 days or so here in Seoul, and it's touching all over the world. I think a lot of cities are missing, so I think we're not over with these 80 and over in cities yet, but I think we're going to see them everywhere, from television to new music shows or whatever it is. I think wherever it's possible, BTS are going to appear, but I think everyone is very excited to see them back in the world tour, because also they have a 360 degrees stage. So it's going to be huge, it's going to be intense, and I think it's going to be a great mix of the past BTS. They showed us singing Microcosmos, like in the closure of the show, and I think it's going to be a very, very nice mix of what it was and what it is and what will be. And so probably I think in 6 months or so we're going to see what K-pop is going to be thanks to BTS. So I think that's the real question we need to answer very soon.
Right, hopefully after the world tour that begins, I believe here in South Korea, in Koyang, we'll talk again about BTS.
We will talk
in the future.
We will keep talking about BTS.
Right. Thank you, Marianna, for your time today.
Thank you so much, Sunny. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. And Raphael, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you so much.
Right, that brings us to the end of this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to join us again same time tomorrow, that is Tuesday.